Hi everyone, you might know me as Chubby Emu. I make videos part-time on YouTube about medical cases I or my colleagues have seen in the past, and this is my third channel, Big Emus, where I talk behind the scenes and camera stuff. So, if you'd like to see more relaxed non-medical content from me, you've come to the right place. I upload here whenever I can, so if you hit the subscribe button, you'll get notifications when I do. And speaking of coming to the right place, if you're looking for a camera review, this is not the right place. This is a story of my thoughts on my use of the camera, the Sony FX6. Today is January 7th, 2022. I got this camera, the Sony FX6, on January 7th, 2021. Today is January 7th, 2021. The next evolution in Chubby Emu, and it is the FX6. I can fit it in one hand. Nice. In that 1 year period, this camera's shot about 85% of everything that I've published as Chubby Emu, both on YouTube and on Snapchat, and as my second channel, Heme Review, where I go more in depth in the science and medicine of the topics that I bring up on the main channel. The other 15% is distributed amongst Blackmagic Ursa 12K, which I rented, Pocket 6K, which I owned but then sold, and Sony A7S III, which I own. When the FX6 was announced on the morning of November 17th, 2020, I pre-ordered it right away. Today is November 19th, 2020. FX6. So FX6 was announced 2 days ago on Tuesday, and I pre-ordered it yesterday. Did I really do it yesterday already? Back then, my kit was split between Canon and Sony. I had the C200 in 18-80 t4.4 compact zoom, a set of Rokinon Cine primes, and some L-series lenses. On the Sony side, I had A7R III and a collection of random E-mount lenses. Getting the FX6 and exiting out of Canon was kind of uncertain to me because I was concerned that I would be consumed more with handling camera problems than actually filming my videos. The unfortunate truth for all the gearheads out there is that what you're pointing the camera at and what that subject is saying is fundamentally more important than anything related to the equipment. I would even go so far as to say if the lighting, props, backdrop, audio, costume, and makeup aren't too distracting to the viewer, the only thing that matters is what the subject is saying and doing. I don't want to say I can't be bothered by camera problems, but I need to know that this stuff works in a way that I can use, period. That said, it took me more than a whole year to learn how to shoot with C200. Nothing was straightforward with it. And basically, almost from the start, I got the feeling that no matter how much I struggled with that camera, I just couldn't get a good picture out of it. Throughout 2017, 2018, and 2019, I had more better performing videos filmed with Sony, A7S II and A7R III, than I did with the Canon. And I wasn't sure if people were just too distracted at how the shots looked from the Canon. Looking back, lots of stuff before 2020 don't look that great. I highlight my difficulties in this video, which was my send-off for the C200 because I sold it in spring of 2021. Today is May 25th, 2021. It's a Tuesday, and this is it. It is a goodbye to the C200. This was a good camera. I learned a lot from it. That said, I was scared to sell it because 2020 was my best year on YouTube up to that point. An overwhelming majority of my videos that year were shot on C200. I solidified my plunge into Sony only in 2021, and on this side of it, I'm glad I did it. It didn't take me long to just be able to use the Sony with confidence, unlike the C200, but I do miss the Canon. There's cool stuff that you can do there that you can't do with Sony. Okay. So the first thing that I needed to learn on the FX6 were these switches for white balance and ISO. The white balance presets from the switches actually change when you activate internal ND. Wild. I wish the C200 had these switches. Why doesn't it? These are just so easy to use, and having the presets make everything move a lot faster. The second thing that I needed to learn was Cine EI mode versus custom shooting. There's no such thing on any of the Sony alpha mirrorless cameras, and there's no mode named that way in Canon Cine. Basically, if you want to do auto white balance like you would have on the A7S III auto ISO, then leave FX6 in custom mode. If you don't want to do those, then go to Cine EI mode. If you want to shoot ProRes RAW with the Atomos recorder, you got to be in Cine EI. So you can't do auto white balance and auto ISO there. And on the subject of ProRes RAW, what comes out of the Shogun 7 still doesn't have white balance metadata sliders in Final Cut Pro. Looks like it's end of life now too, with no upcoming updates. What can you do? And on the subject of RAW, there's two base ISOs that you can shoot at, 800 and 12,800. which when you're recording in RAW and XAVC Intra, these ISO switches don't work on the Atomos recorder, but they do work on FX6's monitor. And also, the naming of the files for both ProRes RAW and in-camera files is no fun. Why can't I put the camera letter, reel number, date, and then clip number in the file? I mean, almost every other non-DSLR, non-mirrorless camera that I've used can do it, but this one can't? Okay. I don't really use ProRes RAW. I shot the Banana video with it. It's nice. You can tell there's a big difference in how the footage is handled. When it comes to YouTube stuff, if you're shooting RAW, you have flexibility for HDR, but that's about it. And that's basically all the hardship that I've had with this camera. You can tell in my first video of 2021 that the color was off. It was lit like how I used the C200, but this is how the FX6 captured it. I think they were almost on the same settings too, so I needed to get used to the sensor. But really, I was off to the races. Where it took me more than a year to learn C200, I got the hang of FX6 super quick. Now, part of that might be because I struggled so long with C200 that by the time I got here, I had a better foundation to stand on than I did years before. So with that said, what are the other quirks about this camera? Any kind of audio that's not camera scratch needs to go through the original handle. It's not my favorite. It's still better than C200's stock handle, except you could easily swap out Canon's stock handle, and you can't do that here. The side grip has a lot of play in it. There's rosette adapters, but I have no idea if they would play with the mount on the camera. Autofocus is also not very good when you have digital zoom on the sensor. Probably like that for any other camera, but I mean, we're at the $6,000 price point. Remember, Sony Venice is around 50 grand, and Arri Alexa Mini LF raised their prices 10% this past October 2021, so that ready-to-shoot kit is $88,000. And they don't sell those to just anyone. Like at B&H, you need to have a special account to access it. Low light is always nice to have, but I generally do whatever I can to not have to film at 12,800 ISO. When you're in controlled conditions, like how I normally film most of my stuff, low light isn't a huge deal, but this thing handles it, so having that feature without an apparent trade-off to me is a plus. All of this brings me to July 2021, and this is when I started posting as Chubby Emu on Snapchat. Whether you like it or not, vertical video is here to stay. I remember in 2017 when suddenly the people watching me on YouTube were more than 50% from a mobile device, mostly from phones. This percent has only gone up over the years. And it's hard for us to sometimes see things from a yearly perspective, but 2017 and 2018 were consecutive years. 2018 is when TikTok got its initial reputation as silly zoomer, hit or miss, or I'm already tracer memes. We all thought that TikTok was gonna fizzle out, but it didn't. I can tell you, I have firsthand experience with doctoral educated 50 and 60-year-olds who are at the top of their careers right now, who are scrolling on TikTok, watching random videos, either on their own volition or it's partly because of their kids. These are also people who watch Darman videos on Facebook and they tell me about it. One demographic I find on my Snapchat, and my videos are popular with them, is women over 35 years old. Vertical video isn't going to go away, and this brings me to camera accessories because I needed to rebuy stuff when I found out that I needed to mount my camera vertically. This taught me what it means to invest in good accessories. I didn't do that with this camera at first, so I learned my lesson the hard way, but this was a second time that I had to do it. When I had the C200, my problem was that I spent all the money on the camera. I mean, it was a ready-to-shoot kit, but it didn't have a base plate, didn't have a bridge plate, didn't have rods, had an okay top handle. When I could afford actual accessories, I bought ones that didn't fit what I needed. I got a used shape cage, a used shoulder kit. I never even shot over the shoulder. And not only that, the rods were too tight going into whatever kind of base plate that thing was, and the height wasn't standard. Those weren't cheap, but they also weren't what I needed. Screws and plates and clamps and supports, like, I don't want to be bothered by this kind of stuff not working. I just need to have it work and be done with it. Anyways, I learned the most important for what I shoot is that I don't want to cheap out on the base plate. Your mileage is probably going to vary, but if you find that you need a base plate, spend extra on a good, robust, and versatile one. There's a standard 15mm lightweight iris rod distance that you need to have from the middle of the rods to the optical center. So there's specific base plates for each camera. You go heavier lenses, now you need a bridge plate going on to 19mm rods or 15mm studio. When you're just shooting mirrorless and you have like a small cage set with Arri style base plate, There's no telling if you have standard 85mm distance, more likely than not you don't. This affects follow focus mounting, lens support, matte box, if you're using it on rods, and whether or not your camera can slide on the dovetail all the way, which for me is important because I also mount this camera vertically for vertical video. And if I want the whole rig to be on there, big lens with support and all of that, I need the distances to be standard. These are little details where if every accessory you have is standard, you don't need to worry about it. But if you mix and match, well, you could potentially have a headache on your hands. And I mixed and matched. I get it. Some of these accessory sets are ultra expensive. Added up together, if you don't have pre-existing accessories to begin with, it can become as much as the price of the camera itself. So for me, luckily, the small rig Airy base plate is the standard 15mm rods distance with FX6. If I really needed to use a 19mm bridge plate, I have the wooden camera base plate for the Ursa 12K, which happens to be the same distance as the FX6, and it has lens support for PL to E-mount adapter. Your trade-off here is that the wooden camera base plate is like 2.5 times the price of the small rig, and the bridge plate is just as much. The other accessory I find essential for FX6 is the wooden camera battery plate that screws into the back of the camera. This is my favorite one because it helps balance the camera by shifting weight to the back, and FX6 is prone to being front heavy. It's also made in a way that I can leave the Sony battery in the camera and hot swap out the V-mount when I need to. If I bought another FX6, I would probably just buy the wooden camera set and be done with it. And the honest truth is, when you sell a camera, you're not going to get that much better of a price for having the accessories, at least at this price tier. You need them to do the job that you need to get done, which is the purpose of having tools in the first place. People who shoot video to make money, I understand you want to get the best possible price when you're selling, but I don't understand the folks who nickel and dime, essentially your colleagues, since you're all in this space together, to make like an extra 50 or $100 on what you're selling. Like, sometimes I see the most ridiculous haggling, even gouging happening on places like Facebook Marketplace or any one of those camera groups on there. Like, I don't know about you, but I don't want anything to do with it. I'd rather pay eBay fees, honestly. The time that I save, I put into my next video. Final point I want to bring up. This camera matches easily with the A7S III, which I also own. When I need 2 camera setups for an interview or for showing chemical properties because I don't want to have to do the experiment a second time, this is a seamless match of 2 cameras. I feel like they're the same sensor but different processing features in the camera for things like codec. At the end of the day, for me, this setup is super easy. It takes hardly any time to get up and running, has internal audio that I need, it captures a pretty nice image, and has additional features for when I need them. Filming things is not my formal professional training, and people aren't watching Chubby Emu just for the image quality. However, I can take those gaps to learn how to film a great looking image that could unexpectedly surprise the people watching and let them know that I do care about the visual part of this medium and the fact that I will go to great lengths to learn how to get those memorable images. Sony FX6, good camera. Thanks so much for watching. Be well.